Okay, so today I want to talk about a little bit of the Arnold aspects, mainly the surface shaders, Arnold standard surface, all the different types of elements and attributes that you can be adjusted with just adding one. Similar to your blends, whenever you added your materials into your blends, but a lot more attributes to have, play with and to be able to hone in exactly, kind of more photorealistic stuff, basically. But before we get there, I kind of need to go over basically how to be able to see these items in Arnold because I want you to be able to start using the Arnold render instead of your Maya software render. A lot of you have been up here. If you don't have your Arnold tab up there, you need to go to your settings, preferences, your plugin manager, and load it. But I think most everyone should have it or be able to. You actually have an Arnold shelf right here, which has got this lights and everything. Um, I like to use the Arnold IPR render or the Arnold render view right here in a separate window because I use two screens. But you can actually um, allow the Arnold to pop up here if you have a four screen view here. Basically, you can make this your real-time Arnold render. This little screen pops up here, and this is kind of your go. Basically, I'm getting a really dark in here because I don't have my light up very much. Um, and every time you do something in the screen, it will update it and slowly start to render out. I don't really like using this view a lot because I can't really see my percentages of render, which I'm sure you can enable it somehow, but I just haven't did it yet, and I just really never use this type of view. What I'll do is I'll work in this screen, but I'll actually have my Arnold render view open here in another window, and it works the same way. You can mash play on it right there. It slowly starts churning out. You can see down here. Then every time you update it here, it's going to move in here. If you scoot in closer, you can actually kind of use the region crop to just to, if you want to adjust something right there. Now it's just going to update that area right there. Usually pretty fast, but you just need to make sure you turn off if you're not going to be viewing your render very soon. So as you can see, I have a little spotlight in here, and the thing about these spotlights, whenever you're running in your Arnold render view, it's really dim compared to if I just did a Maya software render. So you have to basically turn up the intensity of these here Maya lights in your attribute editor, try to get them to come on. It's usually by quite a bit. I'll just keep this running till you can see it. Zoom in a little bit more. Starting to get something there. A value over 20. Now you've kind of gotten somewhere. So if you decide not to add the Arnold lights, or if you don't want to mess with those yet, you will have to basically crank up the intensity of them to try to just be able to see them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a Arnold light here, kind of help with the Arnold surface shader to give it a really nice kind of feel. Now you can add them right here. You have your area lights and your photometric lights, which is the same thing right here. I'm just going to add an area light for now. Notice something came in right here. I'll move it up, and it's got like a directional on it. It just really has a nicer, softer shadow on it. I'm going to scale it up so I can see a little bit better. Kind of aim her right there, maybe. And I am going to turn the intensity up of this one a little bit more. Now Arnold deals with exposure and intensity, so you're kind of dealing with two items here. Exposure is really sensitive to the exposure, which can sometimes tendency to wash out the picture, and the good thing about the Arnold render, if I have a smooth preview, it's going to show the smooth preview be like, but don't let that trick you on like a final render. So I'm just going to zoom in on this little thing right here. You start seeing some textures. A little bit of noise down there, but that can be kind of alleviated with resolution and surface scattering attributes. So now what I want to do is I want to add a material in here and show you what this standard surface shader is all about. You can do this by right clicking, assigning new material, but I'm going to open up my hypershader box. And I am going to go down to the Arnold tab, Arnold standard surface shader, and add it in. Now the thing about the difference between the Arnold surface shaders and just the regular materials in Lambert, you won't be able to see a preview of it up here, so naming is very important. This is going to be my demo, so I'll know which one this is. I'm going to go ahead and apply it. Now this is still running here, so I can kind of see what's going on. Let me kind of shrink this down a little bit. Selected, apply material selection, and it's just a base white. Pretty nice looking. It's already kind of like, you know, just straight out of the bag. It looks a whole lot better than your basic Maya lights and or your Maya software render or your Maya material, the regular blend. I'm gonna go over to the attributes over here, which they're also located over here too if you want to mess with that. The good thing why it's good to have the preview window open is because the materials don't always display the way you'd like them, especially when we get in the presets in the viewport. So it's best just to kind of maybe crop out a region and then start messing with some of the color. I'm just going to add a blue color here, kind of see what it looks like. Now there's 4 major important attributes, and you can read all about these attributes in the standard surface shaders that we'll go over. There's many to do. Base, specular, transmission, subsurface, those are some of the important ones. I am going to link a 2-part series from this lady's Academic Phoenix Plus in the discussion. She goes over these 4 attributes in very great detail, and it's good just to kind of work along with her. I mean, I'll kind of be doing it an overview right now, but like these 2 right here, I'm going to post these. She kind of, I think you can actually download this little shader ball on her website if you feel, and just play around with the attributes and see how well they're looking. As she uses an image-based lighting, which is an image applied to a sky dome, which we'll go over that when we talk about environment lighting and stuff like that. But for right now, it's important just to kind of go ahead and get comfortable with these few attributes in this surface shader and kind of see what they do to your material if there's just a real one light on there. The diffuse roughness will basically control the roughness of the actual color. Zoom in a little bit more here. I really don't have to render this whole thing, but I kind of like it. Metalness, and the way it actually controls the actual base color, in other words. Metalness is really cool. If you crank it up, it does exactly what it says. It affects not the reflection, but the actual color. Makes it more metallic, kind of a harder look, and you see the way it's churning it out here. Which is why I do fear for some of the ones with the lower end operating systems that it may start to lag. Your computer may start lag, which is why you may need to start migrating up to school, doing some of these high resolution renders, or logging in via the ports and being able to do remote from your home base. or just try to work as hard as you can in the crop region so you're not rendering out the entire thing, or just stopping and then kind of pre-planning and knowing where you're going with it. So I'm going to turn my metallic down a little bit. It's already got like a nice smooth plasticky, kind of plasticky but not really. I guess it's more of just a kind of a metal looking little piece there. Your weight, your specular is exactly what it is, the reflection and everything. You can control that. Now I am reflecting a light, so if I adjust the color, it's really not going to affect it too much because I don't have not really an area light. It's basically a straight light. I could try to crank it to like maybe, okay, you can see the way it's contoured it around the side right there, kind of change the reflection levels of that. This IOR is like index of refraction selection. What that is we'll go to our specular section here, and all these terms are defined. Defines the material's Fresnel reflectivity. It's basically the angular function, kind of how the specular level is being reflected, in other words. The antrosity, sorry, contains kind of the stretch of it. You can kind of like angle it. It's like now my specular level is kind of like stretching out a little bit more. You'll see it kind of noisy. Let's crank this down a little bit. No, I won't crank it up. And then you can kind of control the rotation of what's being reflected in there if you had like an image that it was reflecting in there. So if you've got like water, you know how when you look in water or something, it looks upside down, you can start kind of adjusting them. Transmissions are basically how the, you'll notice with the basic standard surface shaders, none of these are activated, the transmission or the subsurface. You can activate those. The transmission basically is due to the opacity of it, how much light's being passed through it. You do need to go into the geometry actually and do a few selections to make it like a clear pass through, which is in the shape here. You'll need to cut off the opaque if you're going to mess with the transmission. Make it start looking clearer. Good for like glass and stuff like that. And your subsurface, basically how much the light scatters when it is coming out of the light source, or how much the light source is scattered on the object itself. Right now there's not much light coming in. I'm kind of cranking it up. You can adjust these colors. Kind of see mainly more where it's going at. Kind of gives it a more flatter feel to it. It's pretty nice. Zero these back out. So I'm going to close this one. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call this one my preset one. Usually my go-to whenever I'm lighting something or I'm adding materials to something, whether it be like a piece of metal or something like that, I usually will kind of levitate to the presets and then kind of go from there. And what is the presets? Preset is through the standard surface shader. Like I just added another one, but if you go create a preset, there's a whole bunch of presets that kind of get you where you need to be at pretty fast with the attributes. So if you're going for like a balloon style, which is kind of a rubbery, shiny rubbery, you can actually add in how much you want to it. I'm just going to replace the entire object with it. I want to add this to the object. It's got a nice setting, and if you notice, the settings have already changed, already adjusted for that, and it's up to you to go in here and play around with different with the different settings to kind of make them work for you. Kind of take the metalness out of it, kind of give it more of a little thickness right there. That's kind of cool. And then you can kind of switch them on the fly if you want to. Rubber comes standard. Gray. Change it to like purple. It doesn't really have a lot of specular level in it. If you wanted to add some hard plastic, make it hard plasticky type feel. Now the cool thing about the presets, you can actually factor in percentages. So if I wanted to factor in 50% of a brushed metal instead of just 100%, in other words, if I remove that and replace the entire thing with the brushed metal, that's what it would look like at 100%. But if I liked that setting that I had with the balloon style, and then I wanted to kind of like go to the brush metal and just like factor in 50% of it, kind of got like a brushed metal with some of the balloon attributes in here. It gives you a whole new selection. It takes upon the previous one selection that you can kind of go ahead and mess around with. Fun stuff. And you just have to watch your render. Like I said, with your render time. And lastly, moving out of the standard surface shader, I will talk about this Arnold toon shader, which is, I haven't really used it much in my experience, but you guys might find a use for it, and it's pretty fun. It is exactly what it does. It's kind of like a paint. Gives that cartoony look, exactly what it is. So I'm going to drop that in here. Toon, which I can kind of tell the difference between this one. I know this is the toon up here. I'm going to go add it in there. There's a few different settings that you're going to have to adjust to be able to see what's going on here. It's basically, you've got this flat gray looking thing right here now. You're going to need to go into your render settings, Arnold render, and your filter. It's on a Gaussian blur. You're going to need to switch that to contour. There it is. Now what does that do? That basically adjusts a few more attributes. If you notice, I've already got some lines coming around here. You can kind of see down here. Show you how to go about doing these colors here. This angle threshold's your big one. The lower you crank it down, the more, and this is why I'm going to unsmooth this object here so you can see them a lot better. Be able to, let me change, you can change your edge color. Crank it down. And you start getting some definition lines. There we go. And the rest is messing around with the angle threshold. You got your edge opacity, your tone map. Tone map's kind of the overall color, saturation of the color. Your base controls basically what the color base is. So let's switch this to like a and let's add like a ramp to this tone map down here. See what happens. Come up with some fun stuff. really chugging on the render. Ugh, very bright. I don't like it. You see the way I'm adjusting my ramp and my tone map. It changes color to a more subtle. But yeah, that's all about adding stuff in here. Let's see if I can try to level this thing out. Black, I think that black is, there we go. Yeah, and so that's your toon render. In other words, you may find a use for it. But if you are into more characters, cartoon characters and stuff like that, looks really good. And I think it looks better at low poly res like that. Because when I was doing it in class, I added the smooth to it, and it really hard to define. You got to really turn your angle, your threshold down to really pick up on the lines. Then kind of like get rid of these sharp things coming off here. Let me see if I can. Yeah, it's pretty cool. One thing I was gonna mention before I end this one is I'm gonna switch this to back to my demo. Is you can actually add bump maps to these things. Where do you go to find these bump maps at, you ask? Because it just doesn't have it here. You've got to actually go down to geometry in the attribute, and you can try to like add a noise in there. Give it a little bit more. Something's happening now. Yeah, this obviously needs to come way down. Oh, I don't want it to go down there. I'm going to turn this off. Amplitude. I'm looking at my shader ball up here. Just a little bit. Really predominant. Section. I have my threshold cranked up. It just look like some little cracks in it. Yeah, bump mapping is, you know, pretty obvious with the Arnold. It looks pretty awesome too. So whatever you decide to add to your, you could add a file in there. I'm pretty sure, I don't think I've ever did that before. Yeah, it already starts to look really cool. So that is an intro to the Arnold surface shader, your AI toon, and how to actually get an image, you know, your image showing in here. I'm going to flip this. There we go. I'm going to close this out for now. And with your lighting, you know, we'll go over a lot more environmental lighting, but if you're having trouble just with the actual lights, you can just, sometimes my go-to is to drop just a physical sky in there. Your physical sky is exactly what it says it is. It kind of takes a physical setting. Because sometimes I like to see what the material looks like in that. It gives it that real photorealistic look. got a horizon line, and you don't, with the renders, you don't have to render out this background. Basically, you can turn the visibility of the camera down, but still gain that lighting. So if you wanted to composite like another background in it or something like that, you can. It just gives it that cool, you just get hard shadows, which you'll have to address. So, okay, that should be good for this one. Like I said, I will send the surface shader link to where you can read all about them, what something does, because there's going to be a lot of attributes in there. There's some attributes I never messed with, and I really don't know what they do, what they can do for me, but that's just because I've just never had a need to. But all the things are listed here that you can kind of go through. And also I will link the two-part series to Academic Phoenix, her very informative overview of the Arnold surface shaders, which are 2018, but they're still very relevant. They still work very good. And she kind of goes through each one and applies it, and goes through a little bit, I guess maybe more detailed than how I described it just now. If you feel like listening to her, feel free to do it. But if not, then have fun with these, and yeah, we'll get more into the actual environment lighting, volumetric lighting with images, in other words, later on in the next one. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.